Okay, it's time to mix up the format here a little bit as we broaden into wider gaming news, especially in the FPS space. Of course, this week, Bungie announced a big delay for Destiny 2's next update, Shadow and Order, which will now leave players hungry for another 3 months. All of that while player counts continue to drop for the game, and Bungie face another significant test for their new title, Marathon, as we approach the server slam in just a few days. Offset that against recent reporting that Arc Raiders has lost around 30% of its player base in recent weeks. Some will speculate, could this be an opportunity for Bungie? Well, we know it could, but Marathon has to actually be good. And against the backdrop of Highguard, which is broadly considered to be a high-level failure of an FPS launch in recent weeks, this of course follows layoffs at the studio, and the Highguard website being taken down, while some devs simultaneously tease that they may be working on new content for the game, which would be pretty surprising. Additionally, devs rally to normalize delaying video games in order to make them better, and they're asking players to encourage big publishers like Sony and Microsoft to allow more time to make games great again. We've got all of that, upcoming hardware delays, the anticipation that gamers will spend up to $62.8 billion in 2026, and plenty more to talk about in the video, so let's get into it. Unfortunately, we start with some bad news from PlayStation, who've decided to shut down Bluepoint Studios. Of course, Bluepoint developed things like Demon's Souls, as well as a whole bunch of remakes and ports of various games. A few years back, they were acquired by PlayStation, of course, and most recently they were known to be working on a now cancelled God of War multiplayer game, as part of PlayStation's kind of live service ambitions, but referencing slower industry growth, changing player behaviour and broader economic headwinds, Sony said to navigate this reality, we need to continue adapting and evolving, and we've taken a close look at our business to ensure we're delivering today while still well positioned for the future, and as a result we'll be closing Bluepoint Games in March. The decision wasn't made lightly, and Bluepoint is an incredibly talented team with their technical expertise delivering exceptional experiences for the PlayStation community. I guess none of that matters if you get canned, right? And literally just an hour or so after that, PlayStation shared that Marathon launches in just 2 weeks, and the comments on that post were brutal, many of them referencing Bluepoint, but also how this could apply to Bungie. And of course it will make studios like Bungie uneasy, given that they're now pretty much completely controlled by Sony. They are in a slightly different position to Bluepoint, but when we look at how Bungie are currently handling Destiny 2, their lack of communication about it, and the general corporate vibes that it gives off, yeah, it's one of the big risks in selling your company to Sony. So share your thoughts about that down below, obviously pretty sad news. On the subject of the Bungie-Sony relationship and their titles, as Destiny 2's player count continues to tank, Bungie announces that the next major update is delayed until June. The delay comes as no surprise, but the length is unexpected. And of course, Bungie have done this with less than 2 weeks until the planned launch of the next major update, but have promised that it will include sizable quality of life updates, reworks to old raid and dungeon content, gear stats and more. Given the length of the delay though, there's a lot of concern about the future of Destiny 2. All of this coming immediately before Marathon's planned server slam, which as we've said will be a massive test for Bungie. They very much need this to go well. One possibility, of course, is that Arc Raiders players may have some interest in Marathon. They're both extraction shooters, although the visual styles and gameplay vary fairly significantly. As reported by Video Gamer though, Arc Raiders has shed nearly a third of its active player base on Steam just weeks before Bungie's rival shooter Marathon is set to launch. Of course, Arc Raiders achieved a massive concurrent player count on Steam of nearly 500,000, although they report that it slumped to roughly 290,000 over this past weekend. Of course, it's been a few weeks since the last big update to Arc Raiders, so this isn't massively surprising, but various journalists, including Paul Tassi, speculate, could this be a window for Marathon to suck up some of those players? Of course, it is a possibility, although Marathon is a very polarizing game, largely because of its art style, and of course the connection to Bungie, who've had lots of bad press in the last couple of years. Although it's less than a week at this point until we'll see precisely how Marathon will perform, as the server slam essentially acts as a free-to-play week for the game, ahead of its actual launch, so if we see bad player numbers for Marathon in the first few days, that isn't necessarily likely to change after the launch. Although we could be surprised, who knows, maybe it's gonna pop off. In other FPS-related news, I guess, Highguard launched a few weeks ago, hitting 100,000 players on Steam, but within hours, that number had dropped significantly, and as we've seen reported in recent days, those player counts are occasionally dropping into triple digits now. And that's why mass layoffs at Wildlight, the studio who developed Highguard, have been reported as well. But in the days following that, Highguard's main website has actually been taken down, so as we can see here, site unavailable. Please contact support for assistance. You might not have much luck there, because apparently they sacked loads of people. And I'm sure this will be making Bungie and Sony very nervous right now, because it was a fairly high-profile failure. I'm confident that Marathon won't struggle to the same extent as this, but given Sony's connection to Concord, and these games broadly being in that FPS raid style niche, which I know is kind of broad, there's a lot of crossover there. Although interestingly, on the official Highguard Discord in the past few days, it was confirmed by a member that the development team are working on some kind of new content for the game. Precisely what that is anybody's guess, but I can assume it won't be something very significant, considering the news about the layoffs. Of course, pressure from publishers and backers of these titles, while it was also reported that Tencent had something to do with Highguard in terms of actually funding the project, that tends to create a lot of pressure on developers to get these games out as soon as possible. But as PC Gamer reports here, DayZ Creator calls to normalize delaying games so that consumers can show Xbox and Sony that delays are okay. Plus, they'd also said, personally, don't pre-order games. It's the only way PlayStation and Xbox will notice us. So this comes from Dean Hall, the creator of DayZ and CEO of Rocketworks, who suggested that players should be more chill about gaming delays, especially since devs often work themselves into far much of a tiz about avoiding delays, sometimes to the detriment of the final product, and we've seen this many times, of course. He stated that some of this is because of revenue pressures, but much of it is wrapped up in perception. Dev fears about disappointing players or exiting the hype circle with a delay, of course, come with their own consequences, but he states that failure to delay also leads to crunch culture. So he suggested, let us normalize delaying games. You as consumers have the power to make it clear that platform holders like Xbox and PlayStation should understand that delays are okay. Most delays happen due to a failure to hit quality, and even when devs want to provide quality, they don't have the money they can spend on it, so they try and hide it or ignore it. And as we've seen, sometimes games are just conceptually bad, right? In other instances, Destiny being a good example, you have a format that's kind of proven to be very popular, but then studios, generally on a commercial level, of course suffer from live service pressure, a desire to hit certain targets in certain parts of the year, and of course that can lead to products which are subpar, and essentially waste their opportunity to perform well, right? So I'd generally be inclined to agree, a delayed game, as has been said, can be far better than an unfinished game published early. But final broader mentions here, US video game consumer spending is predicted to reach $62.8 billion in 2026, which is a 3% increase on the spending attributed to continued sales of Switch 2 and GTA 6, which of course is coming up later in 2026, bar any other delays. There's a perfect example of a big title which has seen a few delays, and while it is frustrating, of course, publishers like Rockstar have far too good of a general reputation, bar a few recent dramas, that it's simply not worth putting out a subpar product. Although I am convinced the only real reason to delay GTA 6 was to add more booty, right? That's the most British way of saying that you've ever heard. Despite increased spending from gamers themselves though, it's been reported that memory shortages could delay PlayStation 6 launch until 2029, as well as increasing the price of consoles like the Switch. So, according to reports, Sony are considering delaying the launch of the PS6 to 2028 or even 29, due to the ongoing memory crisis, but that could also impact other platforms like Switch 2, where price rises are expected due to issues actually producing the hardware. So we'll have to wait for further news on that, but as a general rule, computer chips have slowly been getting more expensive as the various resources to actually produce them are harder to accumulate, or indeed being gatekept by other big producers. So it isn't only the PlayStation, it's graphics cards, it's phones, laptops, cars, you name it. I think it's all just going to get more expensive. So we'll see how it goes, but let me know your thoughts on the state of the games industry at the moment, which titles you're most excited for in 2026, thoughts on Marathon, thoughts on Bungie, Arc Raiders. Honestly, with Arc Raiders, if they respond to player feedback, keep on top of the quality of life, and offer substantial enough updates, I think that game's going to be pretty successful for at least a couple more years, which is precisely why Bungie want to try and tap into that as well. And that will probably be one of the subjects of our next recap, given that by the end of next week, that playtest will be out and we'll know how many people are actually trying Marathon, and how long are they sticking around for? Grab the popcorn, boys, it's gonna be lively. If you've enjoyed the video, a rating really helps us out. Hit subscribe for more news and updates, but otherwise, I'm out of here, man. I hope you guys have an awesome day.